Business Central once again. So as you can see in the module configuration, the complaint management feature has been enabled. And you already see here complaints. But first I would like to show you the setup of complaints. So let's search for complaint management setup. It's an easy setup where you basically need to choose a number series, of course, for the complaints. And since you can imagine, if you start working with complaints, you get a complaint for your customer, you would love to receive a confirmation email or a status update email to that customer, and therefore we are making use of the email standard text, and you can close those or choose those formats over here. If you have one person assigned in your company to handle complaints, you can choose a default person to handle all the complaints, but otherwise, of course, we are able to distribute the complaints to all people across Business Central or departments the way how you like it. Then there are some more setup steps required. For example, the complaint reason codes. And basically you can compare that with the reason codes in Business Central, because there are several reasons to complain, and for those reasons you can create your own code. So here, for example, since we are always demonstrating a furniture trading company, we have created these complaint reason codes. So complaints about the delay of a delivery, goods arrived broken, or received goods which the end customer didn't order, or just complaints about quality or the service or whatsoever. So that's complaint reason codes. The next thing you need to configure is the level of gravity, because some complaints do have a higher priority or are way more important or urgent than others. So keep it very simple. I just have chosen high, low, and medium, but you can completely define them yourselves. And as a last type, you need to configure the default complaint type, which means you can, in our scenario, we say, okay, you can get complaints from customers or from vendors. So we have created two default complaint types. So basically in this overview, I've created a default complaint type for the customer. So as soon as we get a complaint from a customer, the level of gravity is always high. Complaining customers are not the customers you want, so you need to follow up as close as soon as possible on those complaints. So level of gravity is high, and for vendors, just for the demo purposes, I put them on low. And once again, you can also define responsible users. So if one person is responsible for customer complaints or vendor complaints, you can choose them over here as well. So as soon as you've configured your complaint times, your level of gravities, etc., you can start working with those complaints. And to demonstrate that, let's imagine that we are working and we get, for example, a complaint from a customer during a phone call, where people are able to enter the complaint as you go. So we are going to enter a new complaint. Of course, a number will be filled based on the number series we have configured, and then you have the complaint type. So is it a customer or a vendor? We are called by a customer, so let's choose customer, and the customer is complaining about the quality of the delivered goods, right? You can add some more text over here, and you can assign, since we didn't configure the default persons to follow up on those complaints, you can pick or choose one. One thing I forgot to show you earlier is the status code, because a complaint has a certain status, right? First, it's received, reported, or registered, or whatsoever. So I will show you in a minute how that works with the different status codes. The reason code, that's what I showed you earlier. We configured some reason codes to base the complaints on and since this is a complaint about quality, I choose quality, and based on that, if I would have configured a certain person or whatsoever, that would have been assigned automatically. We are called by a customer. let's choose just a random customer. Let's say it's a datum corporation, and contact number is not required unless you want to register the interactions you are doing on this complaint with the contact person. Just like you have interactions in BC by default, we are making use of the same interactions, but to work with interactions, you of course need to select a contact person. So in this case, I choose the contact person from a datum corporation, where you are then able to register the interactions like a phone call or an email or whatsoever. It's also good to know that you can link a complaint to a certain source type. And with a source type, we either mean a sales order or a posted sales invoice or a job or a credit memo or whatsoever. So you can really link your complaint to a certain invoice, or in this case, just for demo purposes, I choose sales order, and then you are filtered by all the sales orders for that particular customer. So let's pick just a random sales order, and now you get an interesting pop-up, but because basically the question is, okay, do you want to copy the information from that, in this case sales order, but it's the same for sales invoice, for example? Do you want to fill up the claim, so the complaint, with the information from the document? If you then choose yes, you will see, if we scroll down a bit, that basically the lines from that sales document in this case are then also entered here in the complaint, so that you can have really all the information related to the complaint on hand for your people to react on. Another thing is, so here are the lines copied from the source document. If you are really working with complaints, or certain persons are responsible in organizations to work with complaints, you can even register the costs of working on that complaint. So for example, if a resource is working for 1 or 2 hours on that complaint, that could be registered here on the complaint, to just to have the insights, how much money you have spent on a certain complaint or whatsoever, or how much costs are involved. And here then, let's imagine the complaint is complete. Then you can change the status. And I just mentioned a minute ago that I forgot to show you the different statuses. So let me show you. There are different statuses for the complaints. So the first status is it's reported, right? An end customer, for example, or in this case, we were called by an end customer. We need to report the claim, basically fill in the complaint document. That's the first step. And then the complaint needs to be registered, right? So as soon as we filled everything in, we can click on, and I will do in a minute, on register complaint, as you can see over here in the left. Then it's registered, and then as soon as it's the status registered, you see here that I have open tasks, because I've configured specific tasks to those status. So for every complaint, as soon as it's the status registered, then the task would be, in this case, assign investigation on this complaint to the related department. Just a very obvious, simple task, but of course you can create way more tasks, even with due dates assigned to certain persons or team, if you really have a very advanced or complex structure to follow up on your complaints or tickets or whatsoever, because this is called complaint management, to work on complaints, but you could even consider or imagine that you can basically use this whole functionality for tickets, for example, as well. And then you have some other statuses, so investigation, and then as soon as it's done, the issue is solved, and then as a very last step, you can then close the complaints. So that's, of course, just a status code and a description you can define yourself if you want to. But there are also some status types, and there I want to explain that the first step always needs to be new. A complaint always starts being new. So that's a required status type for the first row. Then the second one is registered, also needed by the system. And we have chosen to have a split between solved and closed because we see that in certain industries people want to solve a complaint but not close the complaint itself yet, or it needs to be closed by someone else or whatsoever. So we have chosen to split that functionality. So you have the status solved and the status closed. And then the last status is manual. Basically, that means that's just the free field rows you can create. So for example, you see in this overview, we started with reported new, then the next step registered, and we are closing with solved and closed. And in between, I created the phase investigation. The claim is in investigation, and that's a status type manual. And you can have as much manual steps in this status code as you would like to. Also in all ordered, it's possible. So if you want to have a manual step between new and registered, you're completely able to do so. So that's a side step on the different complaint statuses we have. Back to the scenario, we have filled in the complaint and now we are able to simply register the complaint. And as I showed you in the complaint setup, you can make use of the email standard text formats where you then can simply click on, do you want to notify the customer? And if I would click on yes, now an email would go to the contact person with the predefined text. Hey, we have registered your complaint. Someone will call you in 2 working days or whatsoever, right? Just as an example. For the demo purposes, I simply click on no. But now we have registered the complaint. If I now go back to the complaint list.
What can I hear?
Perry, could you please mute yourself? Thanks a lot. Here I have also other complaints already in the list. Let me show you one as an example, because here we have a complaint from a customer on a posted sales invoice. And you can imagine the situation that when customers are complaining about a certain sales invoice, they are not going to pay your invoice before you have done a proper follow-up on that complaint. So as soon as you've chosen a source type, posted sales invoice, a certain sales invoice, you can also add that sales invoice to the blocked documents. And you can simply click on block documents and then click on new. And then you can select the documents you want to have in this fact box as linked block documents. And the nice thing is that as soon as you're working with this complaint, you have linked this sales invoice as a block document. As soon as you are now creating reminders for your sales invoice, this document will automatically be skipped while creating the reminders because it's linked to a complaint. You're already working on the complaint, so it doesn't make sense to send a reminder for this sales invoice to that customer since there's a complaint about it, right? So you can simply skip it in the reminder process. The same applies to posted purchase invoices. If you have a posted purchase invoice, but you have a complaint with your vendor, you can choose the posted purchase invoice as a linked block document, and then it will be skipped in the payment suggestion process. So as soon as you're then going to create payment suggestions, then that purchase invoice will be automatically skipped while creating the payment suggestion because once again there is of course a complaint, so you don't want to pay that invoice yet. It's of course not required, but it's a great optional step with some additional benefits. And that's basically what complaints is in empowered versions of Business Central. The last step I want to show is that of course here we're working as a complaint handler, for example, in an organization with an overview of all the complaints. And it's also good to know that as soon as a complaint has been solved and closed, it will move to archived complaints. The last thing I want to show is if we go to the customer list, In a customer list, you have a fact box, of course, on the right hand side with all the information presented by Microsoft, of course, by default in the fact box with interesting information about that customer. We have added for complaints also an open claims fact box, so that basically at a blink of an eye or at a glance, you can simply see that there are 3 open claims for this particular customer. And from here, you can, of course, dive into those claims, but just to have that overview. And as mentioned during my earlier presentation, I can also quickly show you DMS. So that's the lightweight document management system, which is included in Empowered Business Center as well, where you can basically create your own 3-view folders with documents, etc., which is, of course, really nice to have. Also, in relationship with complaints, if there are certain documents you want to have on hand or whatsoever, you can have that in your document management system as well.